Though he met with the greats of the world from Asia to Africa to Europe and beyond, Herbert W. Armstrong's greatest affection was for one tiny new country at the heart of the world. He loved Israel, and Israel loved him back.
The Philadelphia Church of God presents the Trumpet Daily.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. He had no political party, no royal office, no government commission. He possessed no personal fortune, nor was he backed by any state or corporate interest. Yet he met personally with dozens of heads of state, prime ministers, presidents, kings, emperors, princes, and princesses, and many other leaders of government and industry. And though he also rubbed shoulders with Nobel Prize winners, artists, singers, and athletes, he spent much of his time among the middle class, the lower class, and the tragically impoverished. He teamed up with other leaders in science and education to improve the lives of millions. A prolific author, educator, philanthropist, and minister, he taught the true causes of the problems facing humanity and their ultimate solutions. People called him an ambassador without portfolio, with a commission for peace. His name was Herbert W. Armstrong. Leaders across the globe respected his message, extended him personal invitations, and collaborated with him. Several became his close friends. Mr. Armstrong sometimes traveled 300 days out of the year. But of all the places he visited, his greatest passion was for Jerusalem. As a devoted student and teacher of the Bible, Mr. Armstrong believed in the glorious future of the holy city. He flew to the new nation of Israel more frequently than anywhere else. During one 4-year period, he returned about 50 times. Today on the Trumpet Daily, we remember the very special relationship between Herbert W. Armstrong and the State of Israel.
Hello everyone, today I'm speaking to you from Western Jerusalem. Behind me you can see Israel's Knesset, which is where Israel's legislative branch carries out its duties. It was inside that building that Herbert W. Armstrong formed an iron bridge with Israel's government and with archaeologists from Hebrew University back in 1968. Few people, even among those who closely followed the work of Herbert W. Armstrong, realize how strong his relationship was with leading voices of Israeli society. The relationship began in October 1968 when Mr. Armstrong flew to Israel to meet with Dr. Benjamin Mazar from Hebrew University and to investigate his archaeological excavations on the Temple Mount, adjacent to the Western Wall. He also met with Joseph Aviram, who was secretary of the Israel Exploration Society at the time and a good friend of Benjamin Mazar. Mr. Armstrong joined both men on a tour of the newly commissioned excavation. Prior to the visit, Mr. Armstrong wasn't overly enthusiastic about participating in an archaeological dig, but as he walked the Temple Mount and listened to Dr. Mazar, he later recalled, he realized that Mazar's dig was much more impressive than he had expected. After the tour, Mr. Armstrong then met with high-ranking officials of both Hebrew University and Israel's government inside the Knesset. Besides Mazar and Aviram, among those in attendance were General Yigal Yadin and the Israeli Minister of Tourism, Moshe Kohl. As the meeting drew to a close, Mr. Kohl grabbed Mr. Armstrong's hand and shook it and told Mr. Armstrong that they must form an iron bridge never to be broken between Ambassador College and Hebrew University. Mr. Armstrong recalled later, "The favor we were given in their eyes, the warmth of their attitude toward us, was inspiring, astonishing, and most unusual." Still, Mr. Armstrong didn't want to rush into such a large and significant decision, so he departed Jerusalem, promising to return on December 1st with his official decision. Meanwhile, Mr. Mazar and Mr. Aviram accepted Mr. Armstrong's invitation to visit Ambassador College, and they jetted over to Pasadena, California. Of course, they wanted to learn more about Ambassador and about Mr. Armstrong and about his work. And during that first visit, Mr. Aviram and Mr. Mazar leveled with Mr. Armstrong, asking him outright, "Why would you be interested in supporting archaeological excavations in Jerusalem?" And Mr. Armstrong then flashed his Star of David cufflinks and responded by saying, "Because I'm related to your King David." So as the bond between Herbert Armstrong and Dr. Mazar grew, others took notice of the momentous excavations taking place at the Temple Mount. As a gesture of faith in Mr. Armstrong, the archaeologists turned down 3 other major American universities that were seeking involvement in the Temple Mount project. Instead, Ambassador College was offered a 50-50 joint participation in Israel's newest and most prestigious archaeological excavation. With the relationship growing, Mr. Armstrong returned to Jerusalem. Before his official announcement of support for the Temple Mount excavations, Mr. Armstrong told Benjamin Mazar that he first wanted to meet Israel's president, and the meeting was arranged. On December 1st, 1968, a convoy of executive cars rolled into the driveway of the president's palace in Jerusalem. Israel's president became the first head of state to meet with Mr. Armstrong. At the meeting, Mr. Armstrong pledged $100,000 and 50 ambassador students per year until the project was complete. Mr. Armstrong was then asked if he wanted to put the relationship in a formal legal contract. He said, "My word is good, and I believe yours is too," without any legal entanglement. This was one of Mr. Armstrong's greatest qualities. Mr. Aviram told us just this week, he was a man of his word. He always kept his promises. The meeting impressed Mr. Armstrong too. He later wrote about the meeting with his friends in Israel, as he so affectionately called them, stating, "The meeting was memorable, perhaps historic." And indeed, it was. It's actually when the first beam of that iron bridge that Moshe Cole talked about was laid between Herbert Armstrong and his friends in Israel. Now, over the next 10 years, the iron bridge between Pasadena, California, and this city of Jerusalem bustled with activity. Each summer, scores of young, energetic AC students would pack their bags and fly to Jerusalem to volunteer on the massive excavation on the southern wall of the Temple Mount. During that span, Mr. Armstrong visited the dig many times and was often seen walking arm in arm around the site with his close friend, Dr. Mazar. The men were brothers in arms and shared many similar traits. Both were straight-talking and uncompromising. Both were interested in taking the Bible and objectively proving the truth, rather than trying to fit it in with preconceived beliefs. Like Mr. Armstrong in his occupation, Dr. Mazar regularly consulted the Bible in his work too. Whenever he visited an archaeological site, Dr. Mazar would pry his Bible from his pocket and consult it for advice and direction. When the Temple Mount excavations concluded in 1976, Mr. Armstrong made sure the iron bridge between Pasadena and Jerusalem remained strong. From 1980 through the summer of 1985, he dispatched ambassador students to support excavations led by Dr. Yigal Shiloh, this time at the City of David, just a little ways south of the southern wall of the Temple Mount. Like Mazar, Dr. Shiloh embraced the ambassadors and stated that he would use ambassador students exclusively if he could. "We built the bridge," Mr. Armstrong wrote in November 1980, "and it's still standing, and we're still traveling back and forth on it." In addition to the support of archaeology, the Iron Bridge Partnership had a second goal: to bring the children of Jerusalem, Jew, Muslim, and others, together to learn the way of peace. To further that goal, Mr. Armstrong's Ambassador International Cultural Foundation supported Jerusalem's International Cultural Center for Youth, the ICCY, which is where we are at the moment. The concept of the ICCY had been born in the mind of Moshe Cole, the one who coined the Iron Bridge phrase, after the War of Independence in 1948 and 1949, and it was founded in the spring of 1960 along with the support of U.S. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Mr. Armstrong supported the work of the ICCY and the dream of seeing children of all nations and ethnicities living and playing and growing together in the way of peace. The ICCY named this very square at the entrance of its building in Jerusalem the Herbert W. Armstrong Square. And so today, visitors to this upscale German colony can still see the stone plaque at the edge of the square. Not long after Mr. Armstrong established his friendship, his relationship with the ICCY, and in connection with the same dream of peace for the children of Jerusalem and the world, Mr. Armstrong responded to a request from Jerusalem Mayor Teddy Kollek, who hoped to develop a beautiful park here in downtown Jerusalem. The Ambassador Foundation helped fund the construction of the Liberty Bell Park, specifically the children's playground at its northern entrance just a little ways ahead of us. So this is the children's playground at the north end of the Liberty Bell Park here in Jerusalem. And in 1997, we contacted the Jerusalem Foundation to ask about why the plaque that had been here for a number of years was somehow removed. They told us that the park had undergone some renovations and that they would have to make a new one. And when they made the new one, we were pleasantly surprised. We were just hoping to get Mr. Armstrong's name reinserted here at the children's playground. But as it happens, the new inscription that they put together in Hebrew and in English reads as follows. It says here, "A children's playground, a gift of the Philadelphia Foundation, Herbert W. Armstrong, founder, Gerald R. Fleury, president." So they saw fit to make this connection then between our work and Mr. Armstrong's. But going back to Mr. Armstrong and the work that he did all of those years after 1968, even to this day, we see his name stamped on two great symbols of hope for the future of the children of Jerusalem. Mr. Armstrong's contributions did not go unnoticed by those who sat in the gates of Jerusalem, the leaders who worked from this building behind me. In fact, following his first meeting in the Knesset in 1968 to his death in 1986, Mr. Armstrong was welcomed by every prime minister and president Israel had for the rest of his life, including Prime Ministers Golda Meir, Yitzhak Rabin, Menachem Begin, and Shimon Peres. Israeli leaders valued the work, the counsel, and the friendship of Herbert Armstrong. On November 3rd, 1980, Prime Minister Menachem Begin, just to give you one story that was written about in our literature, Prime Minister Menachem Begin was in a meeting with a group of officials in Tel Aviv, which is about 45 minutes or so from here, west of here by car, and an aide passed him a message, and he immediately arose from his chair. He recessed the meeting, he walked out, got into his car, and his motorcade drove that 45-minute drive to Jerusalem. And what happened during that meeting was that he learned that Mr. Armstrong was visiting Jerusalem. So the Prime Minister hurried to his executive office, where he received Mr. Armstrong, accompanied by Mayor Kollek, and a couple of others. And when someone mentioned that he had interrupted his meeting and made the special drive, the Prime Minister of Israel explained, "Mr. Armstrong, I would get out of bed at 2 in the morning to see you." The meeting ended in an affectionate bear hug. Afterward, the Prime Minister drove back to Tel Aviv and resumed his meeting after a 2.5-hour recess. Mr. Armstrong met with Israeli President Yitzhak Navon a number of times in Jerusalem. In December of 1978, Mr. Navon hosted a special tribute dinner for Mr. Armstrong at his presidential palace to celebrate Mr. Armstrong's 10 years of partnership with Israel. As Mr. Armstrong aged into his 90s, he continued to meet with Israel's leaders. During President Herzog's term, Mr. Armstrong was awarded the Medal of the Knesset by Speaker Menachem Savidor in October 1983. The award was accompanied by this citation. It said, "To the Honorable Mr. Herbert Armstrong, in appreciation of his true friendship for the land and people of Israel and his magnanimous gestures which aid and strengthen the spiritual and moral tenets of our common culture." Accompanying Mr. Armstrong on most of these visits with Israeli leaders was a man who sat in the gate of Jerusalem, perhaps longer than anyone else, his friend, the mayor, Teddy Kollek. Called the greatest builder of Jerusalem since Herod the Great, Mayor Kollek strived to beautify the city for all of its inhabitants, Jew, Muslim, and Christian. Mayor Kollek was re-elected 5 times, and he counted Mr. Armstrong as a close friend through almost his entire public career. When Mr. Armstrong visited Jerusalem, Mr. Kollek went far beyond his duty as mayor. He viewed Mr. Armstrong as more than just another foreign dignitary. He treated him as a valued friend and confidant. The two men developed a strong bond that sprung from their mutual love for Jerusalem, a love that was proven in the work they did together for the city. On one occasion in particular, Mr. Kollek presented Mr. Armstrong with a silver and gold sculpture of David defeating Goliath. "All your life, you have been a fighter of giant lies and giant untruths," Mr. Kollek said. "And as you regard yourself a descendant of David, and rightly so, here in the city of David, we would like to present you with this symbolic sculpture." Mr. Armstrong replied by saying that Jerusalem was destined to become the greatest city in the world, and in fact the whole universe. This city is someday going to be the capital of the universe because this city is going to exist forever, he said. The two men's mutual aspirations for the future of Jerusalem knitted their brotherhood ever closer. This was highlighted in a conversation over lunch in Jerusalem in 1983. Since it was Election Day, Mr. Armstrong led a toast for the re-election of Mayor Kollek. The mayor responded from his chair, "Jerusalem at this time does not have a prophet. You," he said, referring to Mr. Armstrong, "will have to be our prophet." Mr. Armstrong responded, saying that he planned to spend the next 1,000 years in Jerusalem, to which Mayor Kollek quipped, "And I'll be happy to be mayor." At Mr. Armstrong's death in 1986, Mr. Kollek sent the following condolences. He wrote, "It is with great sorrow that we learned the passing of President Herbert Armstrong. One could only be deeply impressed by his vast efforts to promote understanding and peace among peoples. His good deeds were felt in many corners of the world. In Jerusalem, his care and concern can be seen in the many projects he undertook. The archaeological excavations, uncovering the history of millennia, the children's playground, and activities he helped sponsor, the dedicated work of the Ambassador College students. His visits to Jerusalem were always very special, and I was privileged to share these with him. He helped foster the goals we set to ensure the future of Jerusalem, King David's city. Shortly before Mr. Kollek's death, he wrote that he held high regard for this special man and his mission for peace. In 2004, Mr. Kollek said, "There have been very few people that I have known that I so enjoyed speaking with and so greatly admired and valued their counsel." Well, Mr. Armstrong felt the same way about his very close friend. Though he met with the greats of the world, from Asia to Africa to Europe and beyond, Herbert W. Armstrong's greatest affection was for one tiny new country at the heart of the world. He loved Israel, and Israel loved him back. Today, though those whom Mr. Armstrong entrusted with the Ambassador Foundation, with Ambassador College, the Plain Truth Magazine, the Worldwide Church of God, though they've rejected his legacy and closed all the humanitarian and cultural activities down, the Armstrong International Cultural Foundation is working to keep that work alive. We have continued to support the Liberty Bell Park, for example. We've formed a strong bond with Benjamin Mazar's granddaughter, Dr. Eilat Mazar. We've sent several groups of students from Herbert W. Armstrong College to help with the exciting archaeological excavations that she's undertaking in Jerusalem. The foundation chairman, my father, Gerald Fleury, and his staff regularly travel to Jerusalem, as you can see from this presentation, to personally investigate progress on the foundation's activities in the Eternal City. In several other ways, from performing arts to youth camps to publishing to broadcasting to participation in projects in the Holy Land, the Armstrong Foundation and the Philadelphia Church of God continue to raise up the legacy of a remarkable man, an unofficial ambassador for world peace, a great educator, a close acquaintance of world leaders, and a warm friend to Israel.
If you'd like to learn more about the Armstrong International Cultural Foundation and the many humanitarian and cultural projects that we help fund and sponsor, following in the footsteps of Herbert W. Armstrong, just call the number on your screen and we'll send you a free copy of this brochure, A Warm Friend of Israel. Inside this beautiful publication, you'll also learn more about our historic relationship with Dr. Mazar and her family, dating all the way back to Herbert W. Armstrong and Benjamin Mazar, Eilat's grandfather, as well as the Temple Mount excavations of the 1960s and 70s. You'll also read about the strong bond Mr. Armstrong had with Jerusalem Mayor Teddy Kollek, as well as numerous Israeli prime ministers and presidents. Call the number on your screen and request A Warm Friend of Israel. If you'd like to download a copy of this right now, just go to the website at thetrumpetdaily.com. We offered this brochure just a couple of months ago, and it quickly became the most requested publication that we've ever posted online. So call now or download your free copy at the website. Now, also at the website, you can download this PDF as well, Herbert Armstrong's Iron Bridge to Israel. As you'll learn from this handout, even though Mr. Armstrong has been dead for more than 25 years, his name remains attached to the Temple Mount and the City of David excavations. Beyond that, Mr. Armstrong's fingerprints remain all over Jerusalem, and his name still reverberates with many. And most importantly, Herbert Armstrong's work in Jerusalem continues to this day through the Armstrong International Cultural Foundation. Call the number on your screen and ask for both of these publications, A Warm Friend of Israel and Herbert Armstrong's Iron Bridge to Israel. There's no cost or obligation to you. As you know, everything we offer on this program is given away freely. All you have to do is ask for it. Before we go, let me just remind you about the Trumpet magazine. You can get 10 issues of this for free, sent to you every month, if you'd like to keep up with the real meaning behind the news. The circulation to this 20-year-old publication now stands at about 1/3 so ask the operator for a Trumpet subscription, and we'll be sure to add you to our growing list of subscribers. Or if you like, create a bookmark at thetrumpet.com and follow the online version of the Trumpet's unique perspective. Become a Trumpet reader and understand your world as it's plainly revealed under the clear light of Bible prophecy. Thanks for joining us today. As we part ways for the day, we'll leave you with an uplifting vocal solo performed by my sister Laura Turgeon titled By My Spirit. We'll see you next time.
He'd walk on stage slowly to the sound of much applause. Then the Spirit